Hello, Tom Homan and AOC are two good people being used remotely for evil. We know all kinds of things are classified, the secret, but they have to pretend other and hide that and screen that so they can't have it. In other words, everyone knows they're not going to tell them things. That's why you guys have to follow mandated law. There are wire crime acts and methods that the other countries have with our own. Because then they're also shown they have to hide that in nature's demonstrations of it. So now there are people that with on the border is the name of a restaurant. Nothing against the restaurant. I'm sorry, I have to use your name. There's a Robert Rodriguez who's involved with the FBI director Robert Luskin, with people directly and indirectly, and with religious spots as one of the names on one as involved with one of the religious spots, in conjunctions to the state judicial branch offices with like Route 3, and conjunctions to that. In other words, he's involved with on Facebook too, confirmed. Confessions he made, I didn't respond to on my street. The only 2 times I saw him here. And the first time, he just walked by and I didn't respond. Then the second time he said his wife died. The one I saw him walking by with the time before that. These are people that have been timing me since I was a kid, tied to him with others too. Others I don't even know at all that were pretending other, like a Joshua Julian. And also the principal child abuser. The people who countered him put the syntax about how they do that. They said they pretended they knew him first and approached him like that. These are also people that they do things in the opposite because they are being and haven't been used by other names involved. They're needing to do and say whatever in the opposite. These are people who already have roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases. And the court's name put in the same sequence ships and next to the World Trade Center towers. Involved with predicate acts every year since, too, to hide that. As the ones from Washington, D.C. and Connecticut, involved also with the court next to the World Trade Center towers and spots next to it up besides that and the World Trade Center. Involved with them with criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists. See them using words like radical and extremist. In other words, they have terrorist group wrong. They have criminal enterprise group wrong. Grouped nature, this breaching method measures and maintains identities, names of people, sciences, can't defend themselves and their fact achievements and afford to be, let alone to protract. Short words with convictions proper by the identity the sciences share. We would not have had like black pupils whites of eyes left out with that predicate acts with facts method. Those federal evidences, rackets, collusions, blaming other things or others ourselves, why and how they voted on slavery. You don't vote on slavery and pretend you have the Constitution unabridged. You don't counter the ignorance of groups A through Z, differences A through Z. Use tactical terror. Nature shows us its difference. We didn't invent how there are all these different species bodies of individual bodies. All group differences are generated by what demonstrates it to us. It's generating them. In us, it is all things, well, not, but anyway. So WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others. They're in Rocky Hill, Connecticut. They have people next to their collusions with the intelligence at and next to their location, increasingly with people at and next to the state capitol, involved with predicate acts on my street, and with the educators of the people involved. And that's everyone, too, in other ways. Campuses A through Z have other communicated for America's founders, and they communicated for themselves. They had declassified to have communicated for themselves. And the only founder we know the name of specifically is James Madison. Specifically, so you guys wouldn't play games. Oh, well, George Washington was our founder. George Washington was extorted by James Madison's plan and the founders behind him, which are Native Americans too. I don't know their names. I don't know their specifically. No way they had the means to counter those internationally monitored conversations and collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, and way worse than just witch trials, etc. Why is there a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum? All kinds of sense and sensibilities, nature, debate regarding it, communicating other than our founders left to classify to have communicated for those places, the founding locations across America. Those founding locations, they were counter-extorted and forced. No one had free speech. Everyone had to pretend the other to an extent, otherwise be sensed as a body, including if it has a majority of people, and it was easily adapted to, including if it was everyone, and was easily adapted to. Any grouping of countries, easily adapted to. Still a bunch of fakes with humanity in their mouth. They're only capable of it. Good people will stay evil. You guys don't follow mandated law. Get to follow the wire crime acts and methods. Wethersfield police attached me a fake conversation with themselves when I was a kid and now as an adult. These are some people with their own differences and other people's differences. Some Black, Latino themed, Confederate flag themed, KKK themed, Italian themed, Irish themed. They're intercultural and intracultural collusion/S. Otherwise, they sense anybody who's not. In other words, increasingly people involved with home break-ins in my area with the Wethersfield police and whiting forensics. There's a bunch of people tied to former mayors from Wethersfield on Facebook too. Ones with the name with the name Fianza, pretending to be about free speech. They're involved with wire crime acts and methods, planting evidences with the FBI with child sexual medical offenders. And the difference of their guilt, other intelligence tied to them. They have rules with Rhode Island, too. A whole bunch of people tied to Enzo Fianza with people with Rhode Island. I don't even know their names. They know my name. Someone with the name of Michelle. Increasingly, people like with the old Wethersfield and those spots with the Cove and a yacht club are involved with people involved with World Trade Center predicate acts and the state judicial branch office in conjunctions to it. Like with the Enzo Fianza, also involved with body dumping spots, like the body dumping spot of a serial killer and of the reported body dumping spots. Reported two ways, right time when he made confessions about this, years after the reported murder of Billy Grasso, and different reported body dumping spots. These are also intelligence using the right to lie where they don't have the right to lie. Wethersfield police faked conversations with me at the police station when I was a kid and now as an adult with people I never even spoke with. Never even went down there. When I went down there as an adult, I didn't have one word of conversation with anyone. My friends speak for me, and they quote. They just give me more. They just made a confession, pretending me I'm fake, and showing me that they have roles with falsified police report with the principal obscure nature. And people in my area involved with the extended family member, Phil Collusions, has roles with some Mendez police, with Fox Connecticut News and intelligence next to them, and with the Britain Superior Court with some sexual and medical offenders with the campuses. And they're also using their identities and their cultures for identity theft, fraud, slingers, and then pretending it's personal or racism when we bring up their delusions and their fake transcripts. That's why they can't get on paper one name in sequence. These are people involved with Canadian names and Mexican names since before they were countries. Before America and Russia, America to Russia to Ukraine, the suburbs are designed the way that was forced before America's founders were born. Northern colonies and southern colonies, so slavery was entrenched. You guys have other communicated about that than our founders left declassified for themselves to have us communicated for them and for ourselves and for nature itself. You guys replaced what nature itself shows us. All the readings of the statutes are criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw collusion/S, even when not. In other words, increasingly the corrections office and judicial branch offices of Connecticut have rules with the name Colo and tomorrow. Also, they took a shot at me with a pellet gun. The father did. One of the Ray Colos. The day before the President Trump was shot, or reportedly shot. In other words, CNN has sources also involved with this next to all sides of Central Connecticut State University recorded, confessed, demonstrated since I was a kid, making confessions to me. Corruption with the intelligence families at Central Connecticut State University, foreign and domestic. People with the bordering states and the bordering countries that come in, they know each other. In all these different countries, they'll have roles with families that work with psychiatry in the databases. At the campuses, they use the departments individually grouped together, criminally foreign influence, / hypercriminally foreign influence, / delusions raw, black people. It is inseparable from any treatment of American history. How we have black people's whites of eyes. Any proper treatment of American history. It has inseparable from it. How we have black people's whites of eyes in a breaching method reassigned. What nature communicates with that. When nature is not only nature as criminal insidiousness nature. For example, otherwise it is also assigned roles sensing anybody not doing that and not entertaining that to an extent. /s. That body was sensed, including if there were a majority of people, including if it was everyone, it was easily adapted to. That's why you pay attention. You don't separate the subjects. Oh, what's which trial is about? Let's separate. So don't you bring up the slavery, that separate subject. You don't bring up you don't leave out how there was slavery entrenched at the same time as the witch trials. And you don't leave out how there was a breaching method playing games with the differences of Native Americans, even Native Americans against Native Americans, making them fight with each other, making them be a unity insidious against themselves too, for the breaching method. So nature would demonstrate that too. And the breaching method keeps everything that nature is demonstrating about itself and collusions with itself, blamed on other things, others ourselves, even when not correctly, like those collusions. Like, in other words, colonization. Even when blaming that, they're using that truth as a lie. Already, since before religious messages were born, already the campuses were criminally foreign influenced, the exceptions to it, incapable of working with them the way the campus used them originally to be and to stay being, led by the hyper invisible but still discernible. If one group, especially one forced by nature, like the continent of Africa, but now it's all these different you hear people say, I've been hearing since I was a kid. I remember they used to be on the television back in the 70s or 80s, the diaspora, or I mean the Pan Africa. And it was like a different time. It was like, but it sounded like, but we're all sickly distinctly how our campus is criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influence. There's not one one nation that has liberated one voice. They have rules censoring our own voices. We're not being allowed to report predicate acts methods, wire crime methods, mail crime methods. They're trying to look at evidences. They're putting fake evidences and changing it to hide this actually recorded. Whitey Forensics has all kinds of digital crime and organized crimes, collusion /S with the breaching methods use of a location /S. That's why they have such time collusion. Right at psychiatry, too. You know how many kinds of medicines crimes, drugs crimes, putting fake transcripts in databases. Harvard Hospital has rules of the World Trade Center with names before it. I didn't even know it. They're confessing this, too, and pretending other. As the ones who put fake conversations with me through the mail to other people, I can't get them a response from me. Intercities, a whole bunch of people tied to Harvard Hospital have been on and off campuses with a whole bunch of different countries, including the ones involved with the World Trade Center attack. And there's a Scalora family involved with predicate acts and confessions of Wethersfield police, switching names, forging names, wire crime acts, falsified police reports, involved with sexual and medical offenders, involved with more people named Scalora, and people named Phil Collo involved with them, and a Robert Rodriguez, too, with people next to the campuses further. And like there's a Dr. Laura Saunders, I've never met her in my life. She has people tied to her intercities involved. A bunch of people with Harvard Hospital's Institute of Living, founded on the campus of Harvard Hospital in 1822, with slavery still entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies. And they still have roles, collusion /S, replacing what our founders communicated about their roles with that. That's why it's important to understand why there's a witch trials place. next to Webb House, and how it's now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, and how then and now they still have other communicated for our founders than we already have declassified for themselves to have communicated about those locations. We're supposed to understand clearer than day. Everyone was fact nature tortured, extorted, and enslaved, and they were checking to make sure we were collusions against each other. Humanity at locations A through Z, everywhere the human species body is a body. Otherwise, that body was sensed and it was adapted to, including if it was a majority of people. Any grouping, now you're speaking about groups, tactical terror from the one that shows us. We are individual species bodies of individual bodies with all group differences, where it teaches about group. It speaks about black people's rights of eyes. It's nature itself is communicating to us about black and white. We have this left out and replaced. We have it replaced. But so we have to be able, well, let's see the documents. The documents show collusion when we pay attention. They're changing and faking, which they're just faking transcripts and databases at police departments too. 2 retired police chiefs, at least, from Wethersfield, and reportedly the intimate tie of one, tied to an 80 Carriage Hill Drive, with the people with the name Kalal too, tied to the Phil Kalal. And they won't get on paper for years now. Intercities, a whole bunch of people tied to them, and they're educators. In other words, Central Connecticut State University is in New Britain, Connecticut. I'm in Wethersfield, Connecticut. But these are also people on off the state judicial branch offices, on off the state corrections offices. And in comments on YouTube, collusions with a Ray Kalal and a Joshua Julian for the Ray Kalal. And Joshua Julian was one of the ones, too, with them, with a Phil Kalal for Bob Chase with Whiting Forensics. And Joshua Julian on the Facebook page of a principal upskirt nature. He has roles with some black KKK theme, Confederate flag theme, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and organized crimes, identity theft, fraud, and child abuses. These are the same names involved with them were involved with elderly homes at the time, and demonstrably too. All the elderly locations, the people that work for them, these people are sick with their jobs. When since founding, when did any job or title have the integrity where it counts? We would not have had left out black people's rights of eyes. All rise. Get me off the fake conversations with WFSB about the World Channel 3 News, Connecticut. Fake conversations with me about the World Trade Center attack. They changed conversations with others about it. So interstates, they have collusions with World Trade Center attacks after it, predicate acts after it. But is their collusions with names recorded before it too. Time collusions with the Saudi attackers. Connecticut campuses like Trinity College and Central Connecticut had roles with Saudi Arabia since before that. And how their intelligence has roles with psychiatry. Saudi Arabia didn't want that, but they have no choice. See, every country is sickly distinctly a victim. Because this breaching method needs to measure how sickly non-distinctly they are. Everyone's a victim at the same time of the same thing. Rather than countering that or even sensing it, it measures and maintains roles with that and adapting, even if it's a majority of people adapting. In other words, it's a method. /S, and everyone's the /S part. You guys don't need to follow mandated law. So Wethersfield police have ongoing refusing to identify themselves legitimately, and with Hartford Courts people, and with the British Courts, Superior Courts people who have been between every campus I went to, they've been putting predicate acts and facts in the databases. Then they're trying to bring up subjects, leaving out what came first. All kinds of sequence shifts, and in the Ninth Circuit Court, as the court's collusion with names on all sides of the case forced by others too. They're just changing and attach everyone to fake transcripts, fake ties to other, fake natures ties to other, including the investigators of the World Trade Center attack, including the people that fight for their military. They're sensing for the breaching method. They're pretending, in other words, follow mandated law for them. Two, get them on paper, one name in sequence with the Wethersfield Police and the Britain Superior Court, the Hartford Court. They have an officer Hunter involved also with the Dean Judd and his kid, and a whole bunch of people involved with various natures, like one girl, a whole bunch of different rapes, things and things like that. Like Heather Hansen made confessions to my father, apparently. about a Joe DeMoro raping her. And they're recorded. They were recorded involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders against me with their educators, though. I never had a class with them. They're trying to make it look like, oh, they put me in a middle school class with one of the Ray Clows, associated with one of that name Ray Clow, who typed in comments. Also a Joshua Julian, who's one of the ones that Facebook has roles with medical and sexual offenders of kids before they became Meta too. They have roles of organized crimes, all kinds of mental health corruption, and organized crimes with overt criminal enterprises as names at the same time with private criminal enterprises. And they're kept needing to hide live progressions at the same time with the names of houses and businesses next to the campuses, with the same ones concentrated. Whole bunch of people with the spots next to Harvard Hospital have the phenomenon of roles having gone out of their way for identity theft, fraud, slanders against me. And with prosecutors, judges, their family members, like a Mayano family near Harvard Hospital, a DeMoro's Market, where it was then, next to Harvard Hospital, where it is now, and Io's Kitchen, and other businesses in that spot with the Iola next to Buckley High School, not far from Harvard Hospital. Their rules. I never had a class with Joe Iola. He has rules I barely ever saw. I saw him maybe one time in my area. I don't even remember it was him. I didn't even know him. And then one time I saw him years later with a former Mayor Gold, right when I was jogging. I was jogging and I was going to come around there. In other words, they're timing it, standing right near the side entrance to a park. But I was on the sidewalk about it. And I didn't have any word of conversation with him. Then he's trying to plant evidences online with the people and increasingly tried to prove in child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart first force, and people with religious nutbags, and people with the sexual spots and fire to campuses, and next to Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University. I never saw a Joe Iola there. One time they drove by years ago and they made confessions with some of his sisters, apparently with people with the intelligence. They have a whole bunch of countries with the fire departments, with Russians, America, Ukraine, that confessed and recorded Joe Iola involved with them. Also with home break-ins in my area, the people tied to Joe Iola and his roles with the former mayors involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids. There's also a Ruth that was reportedly married to a mayor years ago who's also involved with the child abusers. In other words, I'm not saying he's doing. They have women judges self-valued roles we hear everyone's because there are other natures of organized crimes involved. They are incapable of dealing with evidences legitimately. We have to take care of it.